Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, and in this video I'm going to be going through what's going on in the United States, what's wrong in many ways with not only police in America, but in society in general. I don't know if there's a lot of people that will argue against that statement, that there's something wrong, there's something that's not quite working. I mean, it should be obvious enough. At the same time, I'm sure someone is saying, "You shut up, we have no fucking idea what you're talking about, you disgusting foreigner, shut up." That is part of it, but it's a lot more complex. And I don't think there's there's definitely not an easy solution. I don't think there's going to be a quick solution by any means. This is something that has been brewing on for a very long time, many years, and this is the outcome of that. This is the outcome of that the festering thing going on underneath a layer of civility and normality for many years, and this is just finally blowing up like a hidden bomb underneath society. Now, one of the reasons why I'm doing this video, I just watched Joe Rogan talk with, getting the name right, Jocko Willink. Jocko Willink is one of those guys he's former Navy SEALs. Not only that, he's very articulate. He expresses his ideas very well. He's very measured with the way he speaks and talks. So you cannot ask for a guy that has a lot better communication skills than those two guys. Those two guys are very good at what they do. And in spite of that, I was just listening talk, and it was, God damn it, they just don't get it. They just don't understand what's wrong. And all the respect in the world to those two folks, but they just don't seem to understand. In the case of what Jocko Willink was explaining, he started talking about the police, and immediately he went to, well, back in Afghanistan we did this. That is maybe one of the biggest problems with police in the United States right now, the militarization of the police. It's not about defunding the police. It's not about taking money away from the police. It's the idea that military and police somehow, in any possible way, shape, or form, have certain equivalences, or something that works for military works for the police. That is maybe one of the biggest problems with police in the United States right now. And again, you may be wondering, what the hell do you know? Well, I know because I have had the fortune of living and traveling in different countries. One of those would be the United States. And I know law enforcement in many countries as well. And I know the differences in how law enforcement is done in South America, how law enforcement and military is done in the United States. I have good friends that are military and police all over the world, so I know those differences. And I'll tell you this right away, the big difference is that the police in the United States is very influenced by the military. The entire country, the entire society is influenced by its military role in society. Now, when you watch a movie and it's glorifying lots of the military aspects of the American society, when you watch that's all fun, great, and fantastic. When you play a video game, you play Call of Duty, you play whatever, that is all influenced by a very strong idea of what military role is. Now, and yet again, so as to not offend any super sensitive people out there, because we have super sensitive people on the left and we have super sensitive people on the right. It is so hard to find someone that is thick-skinned, middle ground folks. That is maybe the biggest problem of all of this, is that people just don't talk, people just don't communicate. But going back to this topic, it is all fine and good when you play in the schoolyard about being a soldier, or bad guys, good guys, and all that. But when it happens in the police, that is very different, because when you try to apply military tactics to policing in a civilian environment, police are civilians. And this is something that you even see on TV shows, cops talking about civilians as if they're not civilians themselves. Police are civilians as well. The ones that are not civilians are military. It's military and civilians. If you start with this idea of applying military tactics, and military tactics that for the longest time you've been applying in foreign countries, which you have gone to in a non-permissive environment way. You've invaded a foreign country and you are not liked by the locals. In spite of, yes, I heard the entire interview, and yes, of course, there's people that want you invading their countries. There's a lot of people that just don't want you invading their countries. That's very kind of like natural thing. And I think this is the empathy aspect of all of this is seriously lacking on all levels. Put yourself in anyone else's shoes for just 1 second. Would you like anyone invading your country and telling you everything that's wrong? You probably don't even like me making somewhat of a constructive criticism. Imagine how would you take someone invading your country, even if your country is a complete shit hole. No one likes that. No one likes someone coming to your country and telling you how things are done, or pretty much being the figure of being the man in charge of it. That it's not you. You didn't elect them. They're just arriving there with tanks and guns, and you now have to do what they say, or you just basically get killed. It is a pretty conflictive relationship that you're going to be having. If you think that you're going to be applying anything at all from that kind of experience to your own country and the way in which you're going to be interacting with the public, you have a massive problem. Now, this is just scratching on just a very thin little layer, and you may be saying, oh, you sound like Antifa. No, nothing could be further from the truth. I have I cannot find any common ground at all with Antifa, any far left radical, or even slightly less, more moderate left wing. Nothing. There's nothing there for me. I've suffered all of that for so many years. I know all of that so very well. I've been fed up with all of that so much that I just have I'm allergic to that kind of mentality. Because of having suffered for so long in Argentina, up to the point that I just had to give up and just say, you know what, you guys do you. Imagine if the Chaz becomes all of the United States. Would you be living the rest of your days in the Chaz? Would you do that? Really? No, you wouldn't. Unless you're completely crazy, you wouldn't do that. So that's the position where I've been placed in. So that's part of the experience I'm relating here. But that doesn't change the fact that applying military tactics to police in your country just doesn't work, because you'll be having a lot more of a strong arm attitude towards things, because you are at war. And anything that you apply in war, you just cannot translate that. Yes, maybe there's little things about tactics, but even then, things that you would do in war because you were not going to be putting up the risks of something even worse happening, someone that may have a bomb, so the risk you're taking with that, or someone that gets away and goes on with an operation that ends up costing lots of lives, you just fix that with just one more casualty out of thousands of others. That's just not part of the equation, just doesn't compute. So all of these little things that a guy like Jocko should more than definitely know. But even a guy like him, he still related immediately to his military experience. That just goes to show how strongly the militarization of the police in the United States is. And this is going to be getting a super long video, but I think it's important because for this channel, The Modern Survivalist, the way in which you have to prepare for what's going on, you have to understand what's going on in your country, because if not, you're not going to be preparing accordingly for it. So one of the other things is money. Yes, there's an element of money. What do you do with all of this gear, with all of this equipment, with all of these armored vehicles that you have floating around? They have to end up somewhere, and all of a sudden, Joe Little from little town population 1,000, he just completes a little bit of paperwork, sends it in, and he gets an armored truck. And he paints it all up, gets it ready for deployment on his 1,000 population town, and he has weapons, he has gear, he has all of this stuff that was intended to be used in a military environment. All of a sudden, he's using that for policing in the more radical way of doing that. Then there's a few things that I completely agree with when they were talking. I mean, Joe Rogan and Jocko were talking about you cannot do police work without choking someone. This is the kind of illogical narrative that many on the left have. He's touching her. Stop touching her. Stop choking him. Stop putting your leg on his neck or what. These are all things you actually have to do. Of course, you don't have to put your knee on someone's neck until you actually kill him. But putting your knee on someone's back so as to control that person that is under the influence of drugs, being extremely violent and aggressive. Yes, these are things you do. I had to choke someone once in a fight, not in a gym or in a cage, but actually on the street, a fight with someone. And if I hadn't done that, the only way of stopping the person without choking him would have been doing something a lot worse. So people that think they have an authority or believe their opinions have to be expressed. This goes so deep in so many levels that it's impossible to cover in this video, and I'll do my best to do that as well as I can. But this just goes to show how difficult it's going to be to fix any of this. So many people out there that have this entitlement mentality. I have to be heard because what I have to say is so important. No, you're not. You're not important. The man that just a few days ago, that old dude, the 75-year-old man that got pushed by police, I think it was in Buffalo, was it? I don't remember, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Old dude walks towards the riot police that's moving forward, and he's asking, what do you think you're doing? This 75-year-old fool, a complete fool of a man, he thought that his opinion was more important than the ongoing police operation that was intended to disperse the crowd, because that was the order. That was the order that came down, and these guys had to disperse the population. He just got pushed. He just got pushed out of the way, which is the basic, most elemental tool in riot control. You just push people. You get. And for folks that don't know what I'm talking about, this is pretty simple. You have your boss, you're a cop, you have your boss, and he says, we have to clear this area, this block, this whatever. We have to basically push people out of the way. That's what we have to do. We have to start walking, and we cannot stop. But the 75-year-old dude thought he had the right to go and start engaging in conversation with the police, and everyone else, all of those guys, 100 officers doing their job, getting paid by the city, they all had to stop right now and listen to him because he was so important. You're not important. You may think you are. This is something I tell my kids, not every day, but pretty often. You're not important. The only way you're going to be important, the only way you're going to be special is when you actually do or achieve something special and unique and something that most other people around you haven't achieved. Until you actually do that, you're really just like everyone else. That's something I tell my kids. And you may be thinking, oh, Fernando, you're such an awful parent. Actually, no, I'm not. I have 3 kids. One of them is already an adult. They're all doing great, fantastic. And they will likely achieve things that most people, they've already done a lot of that thanks to the upbringing I've provided to them. But no, I'm not wrong. I'm actually right. A lot of people think they are super special. You've been likely brought up. A lot of these guys protesting right now and shouting and screaming, that is the frustration they feel when their ideology, when the bullshit they grew up with clashes with reality. You know what's happening when they start squealing and shouting and screaming, and they use these, amplifiers as to scream and shout even louder? Because they want to be heard, and they realize that no one gives a fuck about their opinion because they have nothing special to say. If you are out there in a protest screaming about Black Lives Matter and all of this, you're just like the other hundreds of thousands of idiots like you doing the exact same thing. This is the madness in which mostly the United States is involved in. This has happened in some other large cities and capitals around the world, but it's mostly something in the United States. This idea that, and this is something else I was listening to, it's happening everywhere. No, it's not. This is mostly something of a U.S. problem. If you think that people are doing this everywhere, you may see a little bit of in London, maybe, which is London would be like your little U.S. out of U.S. in terms of liberal expression of the population. But then go to Northern Ireland, where I live, you will not see none of this. In fact, there's zero tolerance for any of this sort of stuff. It's actually a very different place than what you would have in London. But many of the other things that I heard these guys, they were talking about, avoiding problems by running and escaping. At a point, I think it was Jocko telling Joe Rogan that if you're being bullied and attacked, you just have to run away. You cannot always fix things by running away. Sometimes you have to confront these situations, especially because they specifically said bullying. If someone is bullying you, you just cannot run away. If you're like in a school environment, what are you going to be doing? Running all the time, getting philosophical again, but sometimes you have to confront your problems. Again, this is something I teach my kids as well. If someone is really going after you, you just have to make your stand, make your positions, and go at it. You have to fight. Sometimes in life, you have to fight. Now, these two guys, they are very much trained martial artists, military, but this idea that sometimes you just can't avoid problems by running away, yes, you can in many cases, especially in street fights or violent encounters on the street. If you can avoid problems, by all means do that. But in life, there's moments in which you have to fight. And when you're being bullied, it's definitely one of those. So lots of problems in this connection between... And what blew my mind is that you're hearing two of the more articulate, better informed, most trained military type of guys that you have available, and they still don't quite get it. At a certain point, Jocko was talking about 1/5 of the time a police officer should be spent in training. So you're going to be training 1 day and 4 days working, or five days working, 1 day. That is impossible to do. He should know it better than anyone else. That is just impossible to finance that sort of thing. Beyond that, it is impossible to get anyone in the police force, well, not anyone, but have any significant number of officers that are able to put up with that. Most of them are awfully out of shape. They cannot even run, let alone fight 1 day a week in serious combative training. Just forget about it. They were even talking about, yes, the way you filter people coming. If you put such a high standard for filtering police officers anywhere in the world, you will not have a police force. You cannot use the same standards that you would be using for Navy SEALs as you use for policing. The standards for policing are really not all that demanding. You guys probably, well, at least some of you guys should know that. It is not that much of a high standard so as to make it into the police. There's a minimum requirement, but it is not all. So what this means is, and this is quickly bringing me to point number 2 that I want to make in this video. Yes, it's going to be pretty long, but it's important. Number 2 is, because of this filter not being as high as some people idealistically would want it to be, what happens is that police, and this is a little key phrase for you guys to keep in mind, police is a reflection of your society. All right. So what I mean is, policing in South America, where you have some very corrupt countries, yes, policing will be very much improvised, rolling with the punches, and very, very corrupt, because the country is very, very corrupt, and the country is entirely improvising and just figuring things out day by day. That has a little bit of an advantage when it comes to policing, because it means that and this is a fact, you can just write this in stone. Your average South American cop will be able to improvise things that would blow the mind of your average cop in the United States, because of lack of resources, because of lack of everything. Just everything is crap and everything sucks, and a cop in that environment has to improvise solutions on the go all the time. You cannot depend on a strong, well-financed structure so as to get this done. And talking about financing, defund the police. No, I mean, that's not going to be fixing anything. If anything, it's going to be less money for proper training, which will have awful results. It's not about defunding the police. It's about having a different take on what police should be. It definitely should not be a reflection of the military in a civilian environment. And this second point I'm making here, this is the key one. It is about your society. your police reflects what's happening in your society. So if in your society you have people that are attacking one another like they're doing right now, you will have that kind of polarization, that kind of division in your police as well. You will have cops that are used to being hated and treated like crap, and they're going to be doing a very tough job with a chip in the shoulder for some of them, anger for others. Cops are people. This is true everywhere that I've been. These are human beings. Military as well. A soldier is a person. It's a person doing a job where his opinion is very much restricted to as much as a free person can be restricted in terms of following orders, even if they suck. But police is, it's a human being put many times in extreme situations where not everyone deals with them as best as they can. And this will reflect a lot of what happens in society. So when we talk about guns and banning guns, and we immediately talk about the problem with mental health care in society in many places, this happens in police as well. The way in which people deal with problems. I'll give you just an example. For example, policing in Spain is a reflection of Spanish society. What is Spanish society? Mostly good-natured people, not violent or aggressive. Crime levels are very low. Policing, kind of could be a lot better, but in essence, it is a Spanish person. It's someone that came out of that society that ended up in that police force, with everything good and bad that involves. A lot of it very good, actually, especially when it comes to the approach to policing and handling some of the more stressful conflicts. They have a more relaxed way of going about it. Sometimes the training you see is not as good as it definitely should be, and that many times has awful consequences because of lack of training, because of lack of funding. When you talk about defunding, those are the bad parts that come along with it. But for example, there was a conflict in the border, one of the cities, in one of the Spanish cities in Africa still. There was a guy with a knife, and basically confronting police with a knife and kind of like attacking the cops there. In the United States, that would have been an immediate shoot the guy. He's attacking you with a knife, with a huge knife. And yes, of course, that would have been more than adequate. No one would have had a problem with that. Now, very interesting, the way in which the Spanish police resolved that was one of the cops, a few of the guys in front was kind of distracted. Then one of the guys on his six picked up a huge block of these plastic street dividers and just threw it over the guy's head. And eventually, he knocked the guy down with a huge chunk of plastic, fell to the floor, probably hit his head, and that was it. Yeah, they arrested the guy, they didn't have to shoot the guy, which would seem like a good resolution to the conflict. Now, first of all, if that had been done in the United States, someone would have immediately gone, "You threw a huge piece of plastic to this poor man's head? How dare you? Look how he fell to the ground. Look how he hit his head. And now he has brain trauma. Now he's hurt. Now he's suffering. All this bullshit." At the same time, if you just shoot the guy, that is within protocol. And okay, yes, that's perfectly fine. It's fine to shoot the guy, but if you hit the guy over the head with something, that is not okay. This is a kind of structured, politically correct bullshit that has a counter effect. You're just placed in a little box where the only thing you can do is just check that little box and just shoot the guy because he has a knife and he's coming at you. You cannot have somewhat of a level of improvisation of, yes, maybe I have enough distance, maybe I feel that the guy is not as sure about his actions, and I make my call right now. I make my decision. That is something that police in the United States, maybe a lot of this because of this military thing of you have to do this and it goes this way, that doesn't give you much room for improvising or finding maybe a better solution. And it's up to you. It's at the end of the day, it's having confidence on that officer making the right decision, using his judgment to his best capability in that moment. It's you're just taking that away from that person, and no, you have to act the way we're telling you to do, and that's basically it. Now, in terms of society, you also have a huge problem with the way it's been polarized these last few decades. A lot of this purely coming out of academia. You have universities that are basically, training camps for the left. You have training camps that are there in your universities spreading this message of Marxism. Not, even there's this mixture of socialism, Marxism, communism. It's kind of all the same thing. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not so much. One thing that definitely does not help is that anything you talk, for example, if anyone is talking about affordable healthcare, you're a Marxist, you're a socialist. You're talking about fair, rules for everyone. Some companies that don't pay a buck for anything and just get, money from the government. And there's and even a political system by which lobbying is legal, which is not something that's legal in many places. There's parts of the world where if you pay a politician for him to get elected and then return the favor, that is a big no-no. That's something that lands you in jail, yet it's perfectly legal in the States. And that is not something that's conducive to a good society, because at the end of the day, the politician is not representing the interests of the guy that is elected him. He's representing the interests of the guy that bought him. So that is pretty bad. In terms of universities, why is it that this Marxism thing festers and grows and is so popular in universities? Well, because it works in their best interest as well. It's a way in which they ensure they have more and more power and more money through different government mechanisms that's being funneled and ends up in their own pockets. When you allow that to happen, and there's also a social component in terms of kids even before they reach college. You're already broke, you're already in debt, imagine that you have an economic, and this brings me to the last point, because if not, this video will last forever, but there's a very strong economic component to this as well. Lots of times these are kids that come from impoverished homes, and independently from their color of skin. There's poor white people as well, in case no one noticed. And many of these kids make a huge effort to end up going to college, getting a better education, because the entire system makes sure they're broke even before they get to college. Should that be really that way? I think not. I think there's better ways of doing things. I think that you can have a lot more affordable college. And this cleanly puts me in the, you're such a Marxist, communist, socialist. No, I'm not. But that is the box in which many will immediately put me in if I say anything other than the echo chamber on what is the official right stance on anything. If I say yes, there's really ways in which you can have a lot better, in which you can have a lot more affordable healthcare, education. Yes, it's been done in lots of other places. It's not rocket science. It's pretty. I've actually been a teacher in a public university, in University of Buenos Aires. I've gone to both private and public universities myself, so I know what I'm talking about. I've been to different countries and had my kids enrolled in all sorts of things, and I know that it's something that, yes, it can definitely be done a lot better than it is right now. Can you have education that's a lot more affordable, or just even free of charge? Nothing is really free in life. No matter if something is being sold as free healthcare, no, someone is somehow paying for that, and that someone is likely you. It's not likely, it's always you. You are always paying for all of that crap that someone is pretending to be giving you for free. Now the thing is, how much is that free thing costing? Because it's not costing the same everywhere. You have a cost of the healthcare and education in the United States. It's a lot more, both public and private. Okay, keep that in mind. It's not just the public thing or the free, nothing is free, but the public thing and the private thing. I mean education and healthcare in the United States, policing in the United States, it's all a lot more expensive than it should be, because money starts leaking through those cracks and goes into the pockets of these same guys that finance and lobby the politicians that you have in charge. Now, that makes it for a lot more expensive. I worked in the public University of Buenos Aires, I taught for free, and I think that what I was teaching was actually quite good. I taught architecture representation, basically sketching, drawing, that sort of thing. It's something that I've been good at since I was a little kid. I've won. Yeah, it may not seem that way based on the sketches and little drawings that I have in my book Street Survival Skills, which I did all of these myself. May not seem that way, but I'm really not all that terrible at it. And I was a pretty good teacher when it was my time for that. I guess I helped out people that needed help beyond sketching and drawing and the stuff that they were studying. I actually had a student that he was a kid who he was showing up to class high. He was on drugs, and he was not American high drug addict, but South American type of drug addict. If you know the difference, you know what I'm talking about. A kid with lots of problems, and working with him to the best of my abilities with what resources I had. By the end of that year, that kid was doing a lot better. That kid found inspiration in the kind of work we were doing there. And I was doing all of this for free. Because I was doing it for free, I was teaching for free because I had gone to that university for free myself. I didn't pay a single cent. Sure, you're being ripped off through the other systems in Argentina, but I didn't pay a single buck for that. So I felt that the way in which I would give back to that university that allowed me to go study is invest some of my own time and teach some kid as well. Well, not some kid, but a class of kids for a few years, for a couple years. That's what I did. That was my way in which I made peace with myself of, okay, this is how I give back to what I took. At the same time, when I went to a private university in Buenos Aires, the Catholic University of Buenos Aires, which is a private one, I just paid whatever I had to pay. And you know what? I had to pay very little. And you know why I had to pay very little? Because there's always a public one that you don't have to pay a single buck. And because of people like me that invest a little bit of their time so as to make that possible, it is good enough that if someone cannot pay the private one, you can go to the public one. And if you don't want to have the crappy classrooms that you have in the public university where sometimes you don't have enough seats for everyone, you can go to the nice, very fancy Catholic university, private one in Buenos Aires, just a few blocks away from their one, and you can go with that. I've done both. Both are great. Both have their pros and their cons. The disadvantage of not having sometimes a seat in the crappy public university does not compensate by the huge advantage of being able to go to college for someone that has no money. That is a huge advantage. And how crappy that building is, how much it leaks when it rains, because it does, how many times you have downright Marxist fucking communist teachers polluting all of that environment. You can still go there like I did, and you can get an education like I did. Just like you can, because of that, the private one is also a possibility, and is also a lot more affordable than if the other one didn't even exist. Because if the one that is public didn't even exist, you would have no other option. They would grab you by the balls, squeeze you as much as they can, because you don't have a choice. You either go to that one and pay whatever it is, or you don't. And if you cannot, well, screw you. That's it. You don't have enough money for going into debt for $100,000 or whatever. I was paying less for my university in Buenos Aires than my parents were paying for my private school. That says a lot of how the system works. It was like $400, kind of like $400 a month. That brings it up for what it's like basically that was it. $400 a month worth of some of the more engineering level 5-year college in a good private university in Buenos Aires back in the day. Today things are a little bit different. But guys, that's my take on it. That's my take on what's so complicated right now. But it's not going to be getting any better, because everything that I'm just talking about right now, it's a social problem. It's a problem that's been going on for a long while, and you don't have any quick fixes. You have none of those. There's no quick solution for this. You cannot change the mentality of the 70% of the population in U.S. colleges are left-leaning right now. They will likely vote socialist, communist, or whatever crap they have available to vote. You cannot get rid of that. You already see that. Those guys will vote. Those guys are already voting. Those guys will probably cost Trump the election, by a very narrow margin. And even if Trump wins now, what's coming next? Let's suppose Trump wins. Let's hope that happens, because if not, I don't know how things are going to be turning out. And even if Trump wins, how are these guys going to be reacting? If they're killing themselves literally over statues right now, they've taken over blocks of downtown Chicago. You're having mayors and governors colluding with Antifa so as to bring down the American government. How are things possibly going to be getting any better anytime soon? I just don't see it. And this is not me being negative. This is just me being realistic based on what I'm seeing. There's a disconnect between reality and the fantasy that some people have in their heads. It was just, I think it was yesterday, a kid attacked a guy with a skateboard, started hitting the guy over the head with a skateboard. The guy had a gun, brought out his gun and shot him. And immediately the reaction is, "Oh, you son of a bitch, you shot him." Well, you're trying to kill someone with a skateboard, hitting him over the head with it. What on earth did you think was going to be happening? Why is it that people have this, we're living in a crazy world. There's people that are getting shot right now, and the headline is, "Cops shoot another black man," and the black man had a gun and was shooting people. Or cops shoot a Latino somewhere in some part of the United States, and they forget to mention that that guy was attacking people and shooting people with a firearm. So all of these things are just going to show how deeply rotten the problem is. The media plays a huge role in all of this. The media is trying to sell headlines. At the end of the day, a lot of this is basically about money. But the headline, the clickbait crap, is completely counterproductive, but that makes people money. That makes the media money, and that's all they care about right now. And a lot of the media also have a political stance. They think that the worse it gets, there's a saying in Argentine politics that says, "Cuanto peor, mejor." You want to remember those words, "Cuanto peor, mejor." What that means is, the worse it gets, the better for us. Remember that, because that's what you're seeing right now. Folks, if you want my take on how to prepare for all of this, get yourself street survival skills. If you got it and like it, please leave a review on Amazon. Those are fantastic, and I hugely appreciate that. And the rest of my books also available there. Surviving the Economic Collapse, something else you may want to get. Guys, take care. See you on our next video.